right, we are back. Week number 4, recapping The Last Dance, and we got probably the two most interesting episodes to date. I'm excited to bring in two of my good friends to discuss with me, and two people who are actually in the appropriate age range to remember some of these events as they were happening. First up, our golf guy on this podcast, Dan DeMartini. Dan, welcome. How are you?
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for coming on. And also, welcome back to the podcast, the first time since football season, Phil Lombardo. Phil, welcome back. How are you?
Doing great, Mike. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let me ask, since I haven't checked in with you in a bit, how's quarantine life going?
About as good as it can go. Still employed, still working, just from home, and just trying to get as many variations of home workouts as possible thrown at me so I keep myself busy.
Yeah, there you go. That's the way to do it. And before we dive into the latest two episodes, I think we're probably, as Jason Taylor, the director, said, we're probably the most fascinating of the bunch. I want to ask each of you guys, like, we're obviously in the generation where we remember this team playing. I don't know how much you actually remember of some of the backstory of this. So, Phil, I'll go to you first. What do you remember most about that 97-98 Bulls team?
I mean, that specific team, for me, the last 3 years, the last three championship Bulls teams kind of molded into each other a little bit. Having a similar lineup and similar sort of dominance. But I do just remember the beginning of that season, finding out that was going to be Phil Jackson's last year, and I remember just lobbying. I wanted the Knicks to try to go after him because I was like, Phil Jackson is by far the best coach I've ever seen. And then being a young basketball fan, you don't quite have the knowledge that we have now. But for me, I just honestly just the aura of Jordan, it also being the chance of it being Jordan's last year, because Jordan said he wouldn't play for another coach, and it was just I didn't buy it really. I thought that Jordan would still end up playing, which he did, but I don't know. I mean, for me, it was just it was just it could be their last hurrah, and it was just exciting to watch it all unfold.
I kind of had a different sense in just that I don't think I truly understood the greatness at the time of what they had already done to that point. It's something that, as we've gotten older, you've just really come to appreciate. You just don't see people and you don't see teams form with that kind of camaraderie that those guys had and the passion and love that they had for each other with Phil Jackson. I always grew up kind of I liked very specific players, and I liked teams that were not really on TV very often. So, what you got was, if you didn't get the Knicks or the Nets, you got the Bulls. So I do have very fond memories of being really young and watching the game with my dad and getting, my dad was always very, very passionate about how to play basketball the right way, how to play defense the right way, how to pass the ball, good shooting technique. It was something he instilled in me very early. So I have very fond memories. And this documentary has done a fantastic job of showcasing some of the best plays that they had as a team. I mean, you don't see it in today's NBA, but there would be some plays where Dennis Rodman would kick it to Pippen, Pippen to Kerr, Kerr to Jordan, Jordan back to Pippen for an easy layup. I mean, when do you see 4 or 5 passes for the easy shot in today's NBA? And so those are the things that I really grew to cherish, and it's the reason why I play basketball in my personal life as long as I have. So it's been amazing to kind of rekindle those feelings from growing up.
Yeah, indeed. And with that, let's not go any further. We're going to put the spoiler warning up. Okay, if you have not seen episodes 7 and 8 of The Last Dance, you've not watched up to that point, and you want to not be spoiled, get out, go watch the 2 hours, come back and listen to this. But I think we got to start off with this beginning of this episode where we basically get the whole sequence of events with Jordan's dad being killed in 1993, the retirement, the conversation with Phil Jackson. Phil, what was your take on seeing all that fresh?
Yeah. So obviously, you knew what happened to Jordan's father. I mean, at least most basketball fans knew what happened. Um, but seeing it in detail and kind of getting a lot of different people's perspectives really just opened my eyes. I mean, Michael Jordan's relationship with his father, from the outside looking in, seems like the relationship any father or son would dream to have. Not only was did Michael see his father as his father, but he was his best friend as well. And to have your father taken away from you like that, especially with that kind of relationship, would be traumatizing to anybody. And knowing all this, it kind of made perfect sense speaking to why MJ decided to pursue a baseball career. But when it comes down to it, that Ahmad Rashad bit where he spoke about tying MJ's tie before the funeral was just heartbreaking to listen to. And it was definitely a tearjerker, and I thought one of the more solemn uh, aspects of this entire series so far.
Yeah, I don't remember as much because we were so young around the way that this documentary, at least episode 7, kind of starts with Jordan's father's death. It really sent me down a rabbit hole. I don't know how all of you have been watching this documentary, but as soon as something comes up, or like a really cool sequence or a player that they reference Jordan going up against that I don't remember that well, I've been like immediately just Googling the heck out of everything. And so I spent about 2 hours this morning trying to figure out what really went down with Michael Jordan's father and who these guys that jumped him, took his car, took those championship rings, who they really were, and trying to piece together like the crime itself. But long story short on that, I mean, it as Phil said, I mean, it's an amazing thing of what we, as growing up, all we've heard is, oh, Michael Jordan walked away from basketball. He went to baseball. It didn't work out. He went back to basketball for his first love, and then he left the game again, and then he came back. So that's all we remember. But when you really now hear from the people that were around Michael, and you see the footage, and you see the swarms of cameras, and the fans, and the security staff, and just what he was going through emotionally and physically, the demands that he was putting on himself, you really understand why he stepped away from the game. And I don't think anybody can blame him for wanting to do something that was passionate to what his father had said to him. I mean, he says it right in the episode. He says straight up, the last conversation I had with my father was about going to baseball. So I thought that was really, really well done, and it was a very, very, in my mind, a small point of, oh, Michael Jordan retired and he wanted to go try baseball. But now that we've really got all those juicy details of what was going on the inside, and that kind of, I don't even know, just that genuine Michael Jordan telling us what was really going on. I just loved every minute of it.
Yeah, I gotta say, like that whole sequence was great. I mean, we will touch back on the relationship we have with his father, which basically hovers over these 2 hours very much. But the thing that fascinates me is the whole mindset that this was not like something that, according to popular like myths, it was not like a secret gambling suspension. It was not like he retired because his father died. It was something that he was planning on doing long before, and something that my guest Melissa Isaacson said earlier in the podcast, basically like. She had talked to him, I think, in January of '93, and he was basically saying, you know what, I was thinking about retiring at that point, and he basically says, I knew after the '92 Olympics I wanted to retire, but, I wanted to win 3 in a row because Magic and Larry hadn't done that, and I just thought that whole conversation he had with Phil Jackson about, you know what, I'm done, I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, without a doubt. And just to add on to that real quick, I was unaware that the media was kind of spiraling that story about his father's death being attributed to his gambling and his behavior, and maybe he was in deep with some bookies, and it caused people to go after his father. And I can't even imagine what that put Michael through at that time, because already on top of the fact that he lost his father and his best friend, then he's getting blamed partially for it. It's beyond me, and the fact that was even thought of without having any sliver of evidence, I don't know if I would have handled it the way Michael did, because I think any athlete today would have came out into the public and shut that down completely, but in a little more of a aggressive tone than Michael did.
You know what's interesting there, Phil, is that in today's kind of, I think as we're watching all of these episodes, this is just another instance where you think about what Jordan would be facing nowadays with social media and people picking sides and hiding behind their keyboard. And while the press back then was able to direct a narrative and Jordan was having to stand up for himself, you wonder what this Twitter world that we're in now, the people that would come to his defense, who would outweigh who if everybody had a say. And it seems like back then, Jordan had to really get tougher than today's current athlete. He had to be the one. If you said something that was false, or you made up a story about him and he knew it, I loved it. The Sports Illustrated thing that we'll get into later. He just said, if you're not coming to me and you don't respect me enough to ask me the question personally, you're gone. You're out. And I respected the crap out of Michael for the way he handled a lot of that.
Yeah, he did. And you brought the baseball thing up. Might as well go there next, because this is a lot of the episode we spend on Michael's baseball career. And we seen they had a 30 for 30 on it before, way back in the day, about I think called Jordan Rides the Bus. And we didn't get a ton of new footage there, but I think this one was interesting because we do get some interesting insights from his manager at the time, Terry Francona, who did have this to say.
Can't believe he actually hit 202. He drove in 50 runs. We had a lot of good prospects that didn't drive in 50 runs. In my opinion, with 1,500 at-bats, he'd have found a way to get to the major league.
That's a fascinating soundbite to me. I don't think he would put his reputation on the line, just say, you know what, Michael Jordan could have been an MLB player with just 1,500 at-bats. He definitely saw something there.
Everybody wanted him to fail. It seems like everybody was so shocked that he walked away from basketball. The immediate narrative was, he's 31 and he's going to go play baseball. 250 runs, it's hitting 202 and 50 runs. Are you that? And to just jump into Double-A ball, I mean, come on now. And if that was happening today, I mean, we saw what happened with Tebow. I mean, and Tebow got to start in, the lowest of low instructional leagues and work his way up. And he hasn't even produced kind of like that. So all I'll say is, Jordan, really, this narrative was always trying to take down the guy at the top. And it's a real shame, but it just goes to a testament of just what kind of a competitor he was.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off what you're saying, Dan, it's I just feel like for most people it was selfish for them to want him to fail, because they want him to fail so he came back and played basketball. Because Michael, there's no argument here that Michael at that time was the greatest athlete possibly that they had ever seen play in a organized sport. And people were just being selfish. They didn't want him to succeed because they knew he would never eclipse what he was in basketball. And he would, even if he was a major leaguer, he would just end up being a pretty good major leaguer at the most, really. And that's a realistic. That's about as realistic of an expectation as you could even have for somebody starting a career in baseball at 31. And I assume most people would kind of teeter on believing or not believing Terry Francona if he was being genuine. But I mean, he was the one there watching MJ take batting practice before games and after games for him, putting in all that extra work. And like Terry said in the documentary, he respected what they were doing and he wanted to succeed as much or more than anybody else out there. So, I mean, he saw MJ putting in the work, his commitment to succeeding, and there was no reason for him to lie just to make MJ look good. I mean, MJ looks pretty good on his own, and I think 202 driving in 50 runs at 31 years old in Double-A ball, not even it's just skipping all the inferior leagues and going right to Double-A. That's pretty impressive.
From what you saw, Phil, do you think that and I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm like, is MJ really trying to be like a 10-year MLB player? I know he in his mind was, I want to prove that I can do it, and he worked his tail off. And they talked about how he changed his routine and his training and his stretching and all of those things. And he gave it a good run. I mean, but I think it was more so he just wanted to do it to kind of pay homage to his father and to kind of live out that dream as well. I think that if you take most professional athletes, maybe just a couple that, I don't know, maybe Russell Wilson, but if you take most professional athletes and that don't play baseball and throw them into baseball and expect them to hit 200 with 50 runs, it's not going to happen. So I actually think that MJ deserved a lot more credit than he got. I agree with you on that. But do you think that he was really thinking this could be, he would just play baseball for the rest of his kind of top athletic years in his early to mid 30s? I'm not sure.
I don't know if that's what he thought was going to happen, but like, just hypothetically speaking, let's say he just took off. You know, he ended up being a lot more successful early on than anybody could have imagined. He gets moved up to the majors in his first year, and he actually ends up producing a little bit. I think he might have stuck it out a little bit longer because he would have, you know, that's a viable career path for him. But I agree with you 100% that it was paying homage to his father. He felt closer to his father when he was on a baseball field, I believe. And I think that's partially why he did what he did.
Yeah, he does mention that well at the points we're talking about this, when he says, you know, like, I feel at peace knowing that my father saw my last basketball game, like that, and these whole things, like, I want my dad to be able to know I follow my dream to play baseball as well. And I do think it's interesting thought experiment that, like, if the strike doesn't happen and they're not asking Jordan to be a SCAD player, maybe he does stick it out a little longer and doesn't go right back to basketball.
Yeah, I agree fully.
Yeah, before we get back to Jordan's return to basketball, let's go back to the 93-94 season for the Bulls' perspective, because we did a lot about that team. We saw their whole situation go with they go through the season. Scottie becomes like the man on the team. They end up going through the playoffs with the Knicks, and they lose to the they lose to the Knicks there, but we have the whole controversy in Game 3 where Scottie Pippen basically does not get drawn up the last play. Phil draws it up for Kukoc. Kukoc is the game winner, and Scottie says, you know what? I'm not taking the floor. I'm sitting this one out. And he, at the time, basically apologized, but in the doc itself, he basically said, I would have done it again. I would have felt disrespected. And to me, I just feel like Scottie is just losing like ground week by week on this doc. I don't think that his reputation is gaining much from this. Even Jordan called him out for being selfish in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I lost a lot of respect for Scottie after watching this episode. I always had very high regard. You know, top 50 player of all time, maybe even higher. And I think for any player to do that, I don't care what your role is on the team. Even if you're Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson says you're not taking the last shot because I see something that I think is going to succeed, wouldn't you trust the coach that's led you to 3 straight championships? Like, I mean, I know that it's your first chance to be in the spotlight, and this is your moment, Scottie, an opportunity for you to be the guy. But if the situation calls for Tony Kukoc to get the final shot, then Tony Kukoc is getting the final shot. And you doubling down in a documentary, however many years later, 30 years later, 35 years later, and saying that you do the same thing over again, just kind of makes you look like a schmuck. And it makes you look stubborn, and it's just kind of silly. And I don't know. I think that MJ probably seeing Scottie say that this many years later made MJ probably lose more respect for him than he already had from that happening in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as well. I've been saying this from the beginning. Scottie has not helped himself. This documentary has only moved him in the negative, from the bad contract signing, which was just insane to be only making what he was making for a 7-year contract, to the decision that we're going to eventually get back to, I'm assuming in episodes 9 and 10, but that, the final season, waiting on getting surgery on his foot because he wanted to, quote unquote, enjoy his summer, really, really doesn't look good. And he's not helping himself. And what's crazy is that he's part of the documentary. and he's getting a chance to speak to these interviewers, these documentarians, and give his side of things. And he's just not helping himself here. And good on Tony Kukoc, who, in all of this, my favorite Bull from all those years really was Tony Kukoc. I remember that it was kind of a cool thing. You got to see he was in that early phase of European players that had some moderate success, and you knew his name. He didn't necessarily, at our age when we were watching the team, we didn't necessarily know who he was. I don't know how much time you want to spend on Tony Kukoc, but good on him for going from kind of being a hero on his team in Europe, and then coming over to the Bulls and taking that secondary, or I would say he was probably like fourth, fifth option on the team, and making. They showed in the documentary how many clutch shots the guy was. He was not afraid to make the shot, and to bring this full circle to Pippen, I mean, it just shows a lack of respect that Pippen had for his own teammates. Was it truly just him and Michael, and he was okay with that? I mean, if I was a Bulls teammate at the time, and I don't know if I could ever really forgive him for that, but somehow they did. They talked it through and were able to bring it back. But I mean, man, wow, that is as low as it gets to walk out on your team. We've seen it in sports in recent years. We've seen it in the NFL, guys that leave early for halftime. At the end of a game, they just don't want to deal with it. And that is about as diva as it gets. So, tough.
Yeah, Dan, just to let you know, Tony Kukoc averaged 11 points a game, which was the fourth most on his team at the time, behind B.J. Armstrong, Horace Grant, and Scottie Pippen. But you didn't see B.J. Armstrong and Horace Grant getting upset that they weren't getting the final shot. I understand that Scottie was always number 2 to MJ, and this is what he thought he deserved. But no, Scottie, you averaged 22 points a game, and the fourth option, who was a young stud, he was 25 years old. It's not like Tony Kukoc was like not a veteran. He's been playing basketball for a long time. A Hall of Fame coach, or future Hall of Fame coach, wanted to draw up a play for him, and I just don't understand why you'd act like a child in that situation.
Yeah, and the play he drew up, Jackson even says they thought that defensively, what they were facing, this play was going to work, and Kukoc has already hit it 5 times and proven he can do it.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you go with that? If Pippen got them there, what does the one shot really matter? That just shows somebody who is insecure with their own position on the team. And, maybe that was Pippen showing a little bit that, he was trying to be Michael, but he wasn't Michael. And that's what really made him upset. I don't know.
Yeah, speaking of Michael, I mean, like, we get to see this series, like, how the difference is between what he gets at, how he views his relationship with his teammates, and compared to, like, other guys that we just saw with how Scottie viewed his teammates. And I think probably the most powerful moment we've had out of Jordan's entire series came at the end of episode 7. I did pull the clip, so I want to play that, get your reaction to it.
I don't have to do this. I'm only doing it because it is who I am. That's how I played the game. That was my mentality. If you don't want to play that way, don't play that way. Break.
I don't know about you guys, but I mean, like, when I saw it the first time, I'm like, wow, this is really, really good stuff. It's like really raw, really genuine Jordan, and like we've gotten a lot of that in the doc, but I don't think we've ever gotten like something like that. And it's something, as Jason, the hair of the director, has said, like, that stuff is phenomenal.
Before watching this, there was always that kind of dialogue about Jordan being a bad teammate and being an a-hole, being a jerk, being unfair. And I think I've done a complete 180 because I was pretty uneducated on that whole thing because it's all behind the scenes and hearsay, basically. There was never anything interviewing all of his teammates about Michael. There was never anything out there for us to watch. And I think it's all a load of BS about him being a bad teammate. And he said before the documentary that he was worried about the documentary making him look like a bad person. He's a human, just like everybody else. I think he was a good teammate, actually, on the contrary. Maybe he expected a little too much from people, which is natural because he was the greatest to ever do it. and he had expectations for himself, which he probably held everybody else to the same standard, which is a little unfair, I guess. But he, along with Phil Jackson, created a winning culture for a losing franchise, and that's not an easy thing to do. And sometimes, like, I loved his back and forth with Scotty Burrell. I thought that was just really awesome footage. Pushing the young rookie who he saw talent, who saw potential, but thought he might have been a little soft on the outside. And you know what? I think that paid dividends for the team down the road. And I don't think that team without Michael does as well as they do in '94, in the '94 season, without having that culture instilled in them. And I think that's why it suffered the next year, because they were 2 years removed from Michael. The year after, they still had the championship in their back of their head. They still had that winning mentality. And I feel like he kind of got a raw deal when it came to not having the truth really be out there until this documentary came out.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off that, I had mixed emotions about it, because on one hand, I'm like, all right, he's the best NBA player of all time, and he's the toughest competitor, arguably, ever to play in sports. And the guy had the ultimate drive to win, and he was naturally, you were either going to rise to his expectations or you were going to let him down. And you knew that if you brought the best, he was trying to bring the best out in you. And so I'm kind of torn on this. I thought it was a little unfair of the guys to be taking shots. Like, would we know the names of Luke Longley and Bill Cartwright and, all these guys? Maybe we know Paxson and Kerr, but, will we really be talking about these guys if it wasn't for Michael Jordan bringing them to all those titles? I mean, let's think about that Bulls team from 1989 to 1998 without Jordan, right? I mean, come on. It would just be a footnote of whatever they would do. So, yeah, I really feel like they should have been more appreciative for all that Michael was doing to make them the best players that they possibly could be, and give them this platform for success. And I'm sure that, as much as he was tough on them then, if they could, flash forward to the future and see the success and credibility that Steve Kerr has now, that John Paxson has as a GM and a front office guy now, I mean, none of that would have happened had Michael Jordan not driven them to that point. And I always appreciated the tough love teammates, the guys that you wanted to get into a fight with, because as soon as you met them eye to eye and you fought back with them, you knew that bond and respect between each other was never going to go away. So I was really torn on them taking their shots. Maybe MJ pushed it. He was too much all the time, and that's just not okay. There's kind of a guy code on sports teams, team sports, where you got to kind of know when to put it on, and when you're having a bad practice, regroup and keep the status quo. But it sounds like to me that they were leaning, or I'm leaning, that a lot of them should just be thankful for everything that Michael did.
Yeah, I mean, Judd Bushler said that he was an a-hole, he was a jerk, and they all and a lot of the guys said at the time. But then he goes and says, looking back on it, it was coming from a good place, with good intentions. And obviously he's just, like I said before, he's human. He's going to make mistakes. Even Michael Jordan is human, but he had new players funneling into Chicago every year. It wasn't the same exact team every year, so he had to instill a winning culture. And Michael said that in this. I don't know if it was the 7th or the 8th episode, but he said that he needed to show that tough love and make sure people knew what it took to win.
And what's interesting there too is they really didn't talk about whether he was ever able to truly grieve the loss of his father. And they did mention the fact that it was hard for Michael to come back and play basketball knowing that his father wasn't going to be there as soon as he got off the court. So maybe there was that anger, that frustration that, how could this have happened to my father, that he never truly dealt with, that he was taking out his frustration in the one thing he knew he could control, and that was his team and that Bulls team. So there could have been. I got the sense that there's some underlying, grievance just within him that he hasn't been, or sadness that he hasn't been able to emotionally deal with at that time too. So I'm not a therapist or anything, but as we're watching the documentary, you do get the sense that hurt him more than he let on.
No, yeah. I mean, I was just going to say, they show that clip of him winning the third title, and he's just laying on the ground crying. And you can just see he just let everything out because he probably bottled things up inside of him for so long. Just like he did when he won his first title. He's just sitting there crying. He's so happy. But, because he just has all the pressure of the world on him. And then on top of the fact that he's dealing with the loss of his father, getting partially blamed for it, and, being just emotionally and physically drained from just all this basketball and just nonstop media attention and attention from fans, never really getting a break during his life. That's why he said, any chance I had to be alone, I'm going to be alone because I just need to get away from everybody.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I actually do have that clip on the board here, the clip of Jordan winning that fourth title. So I will go to that right now.
NBA championship. That gives 4 in 6 years. Michael, I know that the first one was sweet, but how much sweeter was this one?
Well, I can't even put it in words. My father's everybody means to me. I know he's watching. To my wife, to my kids, to my mother, my brothers and sisters. This is for Daddy. I'm very happy for you.
That one really, really hits you home, like with the music, with the footage, everything. I mean, that one's just like, you just see it all just come out of him right there. You just can't, like Phil said a minute ago, it's like he literally just gave everything he had in that game, and you just saw the weight just be lifted off his shoulders, and like he just had a moment to like actually be human. It's like really, really powerful stuff.
Yeah, and would it have shocked anybody if 2 days later he's back in the gym again? I mean, he truly is one of a kind. I mean, you can talk about the greats in all the other sports, but we are getting an inside view unlike anything we'll see from any other competitor. It really, I mean, it's clips like that make you just kind of lose yourself in that moment again. So really, really great stuff.
Yeah, I had chills. I had chills watching it, and when I saw that clip, and it's happened like over and over again, it makes me, I just see Kobe in Michael so much now, because we got to see Kobe a lot more coherently than we got to see Michael. And it's like watching a reincarnate of Michael Jordan was Kobe Bryant. You saw all these mannerisms, all the way he carried himself, the way he talked to the media, the way he played the game. And I know this is an older episode, but I had to get that out because I just keep seeing Kobe. And it's just, and Michael said when he was giving his eulogy that, he's like a little brother. And I think Kobe just wanted to be as close to Michael Jordan as he could possibly be. And he might forever be as close to Michael as we'll ever see.
Yeah, for sure. Kobe, I mean, that's the thing that bothers me also is every basically LeBron's the next Jordan, LeBron this, LeBron that. Like, they are not even remotely the same player. It's like Kobe is far closer to what Jordan's essence was than LeBron ever has been.
I compare LeBron more to Magic when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I have to agree. Having now really watched this documentary, instead of just saying who's better, I think the better just buckets to put them in is exactly what you said. Put Michael and Kobe, put LeBron and Magic. They've gone about it in totally different ways. And LeBron wants to be loved and liked, and Michael and Kobe earned love. They didn't ask for it. They didn't care for it. And I truly think that this has put that dividing line in my mind. And all fantastic players, but for me, I just now look as much as you now see Kobe and Michael and the comparisons. For me, I think less of the LeBron Michael comparison in my mind. This has actually separated them for me.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah, this is you see a lot of the differences between it, especially like the drive to like make the teammates better and all that. That's nothing we really see out of LeBron. And like I doubt we've ever had a situation with LeBron like the one we saw in the episode tonight with Michael Jordan and Steve Kerr, and getting both sides of that fight was actually very interesting. So I think that's my last clip I have for the audio. So I want to play that for a minute.
So one day at practice, Phil put Steve Kerr guarding me.
We were on opposite sides in a scrimmage, and he's talking all kinds of trash, and I'm pissed because, we're getting our ass kicked.
Phil sensed my aggression, but he was trying to tone me down, and he starts calling these tick-attack fouls. Now I'm getting mad because for you to be protecting this guy, it's not going to help us when we play New York. It's not going to help us when we play these teams that are very physical. Next time he did it, I just hauled off and I said, when I fouled Steve Kerr, I said, now that's a foul.
I have a lot of patience as a human being, but I tend to snap at some point because I'm extremely competitive too. Just not really good enough to back it up usually, but I'm going. I'm gonna fight.
He hauls off and hits me in the chest, and I just haul off and hit him right in the eye. And Phil just throws me out of practice.
Yeah, I think it's something that Dan Richie brought up earlier. So I was waiting for the time to get back to it, the whole Steve Kerr, Michael Jordan fight. And, like, you do see, like, at the times that, like, Michael does at times cross the line where he does go too far. But, like, he admits afterwards in this interview, the clip that's not part of this thing that I downloaded here, basically said, like, Steve Kerr earned my respect that day because I saw the fight in him. And then they were sort of respected each other. And that's something I thought that was interesting that Dan was hinting at earlier.
Yeah, and he breaks down. He talks about it as well. I mean, he says straight up that who am I to be hitting the smallest guy on the team? What kind of a leader am I? And that was more important to me, was not that Steve Kerr challenged him because good on Steve Kerr for stepping up to him because Jordan clearly found the line and crossed it. But also on Steve Kerr, on Michael for just saying wow, okay, maybe I need to realize that not everybody is like me, and I need to continue to adapt for the success of this team. And it was cool to see him internalize that and pick up the phone and call Kerr and apologize, because I don't know how many professional athletes nowadays get in an argument with a teammate, and instead of saying, wow, I was wrong, and then call that teammate later in the day to apologize and be the bigger man, instead of just calling their agent looking for a trade. So, I mean, it kind of says something about the character of Michael, but Steve Kerr as well.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta just look at it from MJ's perspective too. You're Michael Jordan. You are pretty much God when it comes to the NBA at that time, and actually all sports. And for a small, 6'3" little white guy named Steve Kerr to stand up to you, that's gotta, earn your respect, because he wouldn't back down. And you know how many guys twice the size of Steve Kerr were probably bowing to Jordan, as his teammates throughout his career and even in college, I'm sure. It just, it's a testament to Kerr's toughness and his respect for himself, and it's funny because he says I'm somebody who bottles everything up and then just snaps. I'm the same way. Like, I'll bottle things up and then just snap at somebody, and that's not the best way to approach it all the time, because I'll just let somebody poke and prod me. But it kind of hit me home, and I'm like, yeah, Steve, good on you, man. Good on you for standing up to the big guy, but also good on Michael for immediately realizing his mistake and making it right.
Yeah, indeed. Let's bounce around a little bit, some other points in the episode. Let's get some other storylines here. One of my favorite parts of the 2 hours was the whole Bradford Smith saga, where where Michael Jordan basically tells the story from the 1993 season, where Bradford Smith, some little known guy on the Washington Bullets at the time, has the game of his life against MJ and scores 37 in. They play next night at back-to-back. Michael Jordan says, you know what, I'm going to score as many he scored for the game in the first half, and he puts up 36 in that game. So I also loved he gave himself a motivation, basically lying himself, saying that Bradford went up and said, "Nice game, Mike." I love that kind of stuff. I'm sure it sent Dan down the Wikipedia rabbit hole to look up more about Bradford Smith.
Yeah, I mean that sequence and Ahmad Rashad being able to say like they're pretty. I mean, it's basically known that he made it up. And poor Bradford Smith, right? I mean, come on now. Think about how many scenarios Michael probably had to mentally create and the animosity, because that was his fuel, right? I mean, he wanted everybody to be against him, and he needed that. It drove that competitive edge, and to see him go out and in a back-to-back and one guy have a good night. One night, Michael didn't play as well as one, completely to the majority of even diehard sports fans, unknown commodity, has a better game than Michael, and Michael has to come out and completely bury him. And it's just an amazing anecdote, and I love that they included it in the documentary, because as much as we're talking about Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman as the people, I really appreciate the way that this documentary is going about the storylines with these other teams who you didn't realize were building up against this Chicago Bull machine at the time, and the ways that they were doing so, and the way that the NBA nowadays, obviously we've had recent dynasty discussions about what Golden State has done in San Antonio and some other, and the Lakers, and obviously there's been recent success there. But I just have to say that it's so fascinating to me to see how this documentary is lighting up the competition, the different teams and the different players that got at Jordan and brought that out of him. It was Gary Payton in episode 8, but it was as small as Bradford Smith in episode 8. So, it crossed the whole league. It was Isaiah Thomas a few episodes ago. So it just goes to show you, it didn't matter how big or small the player was. Jordan was always looking for some sort of a fight, some sort of a fuel. And that's what I really love about the documentary, is to see what was driving Jordan to do all of this. And that's a big part of it. And they're doing a really good job of giving us that.
Yeah, and throughout the documentary, Jordan brings up fuel a lot, because think about everything he was accomplishing. He needed to keep himself motivated somehow. And even if it was something as little as Bradford Smith scoring 37 points in a meaningless regular season game, he needed to keep things interesting, and he needed to keep challenging himself in different ways. And I just, like you said, poor Bradford Smith. Who knows what this guy would have done? Jordan has been known to ruin people's careers, make them feel so little of themselves. I don't know if they brought up the Muggsy Bogues story. I don't think they have during this documentary, but I think everybody knows the Muggsy Bogues story during the playoffs when he had the chance for the game-winning shot. Jordan leaves him wide open, says, "Shoot the ball, you effing midget." And then Muggsy Bogues misses the shot, and he even says to this day he was never the same after that. So think about how Bradford Smith felt after all the trash Jordan was probably talking to him while he dismantled his team on the second game of that back-to-back.
Yes, there's a lot of crazy stuff there. It's like, I know they didn't mention the Muggsy Bogues, but we did get the B.J. Armstrong story of that series with the stuff. And it was so funny watching B.J. Armstrong just have the game of his life, and then the rest of the teammates are like, "Oh no, what'd you do? You woke Jordan up. Now we're doomed."
I just really think that what's incredible is that you rarely see this. People that talk the talk and can walk the walk. And that was the thing with Jordan. And these guys knew it too. And yet they still, took their shots. And I don't blame them, because in the heat of a contest, I mean, I've done it. And when I've been playing sports, if I knew a team was better than me, maybe you thought that, okay, if you had a few good plays and you tried to get in their head, that would work, but it didn't work on Jordan. He was always ready for it, and he would come back and crush you. And you just have to wonder what some of the conversations were like in the Hornets locker room after that loss in Game 2. What people were saying to Armstrong, like, what did you do to us? But I'm sure that conversation was had many, many times by some of the best players in NBA history in being careful what they said and did to Jordan.
I mean, and the thing is, B.J. Armstrong was Jordan's teammate. Jordan knew B.J. Armstrong's moves, what he liked, where he liked to go, where his spots were on the court, and he had one good game. And the Hornets were clearly the inferior team, as B.J. Armstrong said. So Jordan even said it himself. He's like, I don't know what B.J. was thinking. He should have known better than to poke the bear. And yeah, there you go, B.J. You got smoked the rest of the series. I think what they said, the next game he scored like 2 points.
Yep.
Yeah, not good.
It was not a good showing from BJ, and BJ was a key part of like the storyline of Jordan coming back in '95 because we get the point of the strike in baseball. He goes and meets BJ Armstrong for breakfast. They have like donuts, and they're like, let's go to practice. And Jordan gets back in there. He decides to come back, and then we find out finally that like literally it was him who came up with the idea to write the 2-word press release, "I'm back." I think that's just perfect Michael style, like I'm not going to waste all your time with the nonsense and the frivolity and all like the charades and all that. It's just, I'm here for business. I'm here to win. I'm back. Says it perfectly.
Classic. So classic. And that's really all I have to say about it. It's just, that's vintage Jordan, absolute classic line, something that, will go down in history as one of the more badass things I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan learned how to control the narrative. It took him a lot of years. The press would run with stories. He was fairly soft-spoken about a lot of topics. Like you see a lot of today's athletes that get frustrated if they're getting certain questions to their locker. Jordan dealt with a lot of tough questions. There were certain topics he didn't want to address at certain times, but he was always courteous for the most part, when he was being interviewed. And it seemed like it kind of got all the way to this point where Jordan realized that everybody wanted to hear it or know where he was going, know what he was having for dinner, know what time he was showing up for practice, or what shoes he was wearing that day. That he knew all he had to say was "I'm back," and that was going to be it. And so it really is amazing. I don't think that we will probably ever have another athlete that the entire sports world is waiting and just to see what they're going to do next. I think that was such a special time in sports that basketball was in the forefront of everybody's mind, and Michael Jordan was the guy. So that still said, it's a classic MJ line.
It is a classic MJ line. We also got to see a little bit behind the classic MJ movie, Space Jam, and we saw how he used basically his time while he was filming to basically get himself back into basketball shape. I think the coolest thing we learned about this is that they set up this court and that like every night he'd be like calling people to come in and he'd have all these NBA All-Stars showing up playing Shirts versus Skins pickup games. This is after he films all day, he does workouts, and he's playing pickup games. He's so competitive, and he has call times the next day for like 6, 7 a.m. Like that was like incredible seeing that stuff.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of any of that, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. And it's just a testament to his work ethic. He, at the end of the day, he was filming movies for sometimes 12 hours a day, but he always made time to ball, and he always made time to work on his game. And he also used that time to scout some of his competition, as he said. He was sitting on the sideline, not just twiddling his thumbs. He was watching players, seeing what their tendencies were, seeing where they like to position themselves, their shooting motions, how much time they took to make certain moves, and he was very calculating.
It was kind of interesting to me. The one guy that wasn't in the movie Space Jam, but that probably could have been, that we saw there at the practice was Reggie Miller, and I was kind of it's not like Reggie was a rookie at the time that they were filming that. He had been in the league for at least 5 years at that point, maybe more. So it was kind of interesting to me that even a guy like Reggie Miller, who was kind of just getting in the next episode is going to lead right into what he did with the Pacers. But it's kind of interesting to me that a guy like Reggie would go and practice with all of those guys. Obviously, he was trying to get himself better, but also he was showing his cards a little bit. And, we all now know what happens in the next, well, I won't try to spoil too much for people that aren't looking, but, it becomes a real battle between MJ and Reggie Miller. They have one of the series for the ages. And it's really interesting to me. I was sitting there watching that clip of Reggie Miller going to the basket and MJ sitting there, as Phil said, kind of noting everybody. And I'm like, man, I wonder if MJ picked up on some stuff in Reggie's game that backfired. So we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. And the last thing I want to touch on is something that Phil's brought up off air. I think it's an interesting conversation. We get the 95-96 Bulls team, the one that won the 72 games. They end up winning it all. And, it's a fascinating debate for the ages. Which team was better? The 95-96 Bulls, 15, 16, 16, 17, I forget what year it was, the Warriors, the 173. I mean, the title thing, I think, to me, does push towards the Bulls. But I think if you put those two teams on the same court, it'd be a lot of fun.
It seems I'll let Phil answer this one because he's obviously got a really good perspective on this, having kind of been, watching a lot more of the Golden State games. I'm personally, as a Grizzlies fan, every time I watch the Warriors, I just watch it in envy. But for the most part, I would just personally say that I have a hard time making the comparison just because they played such a different game. The game was so much more physical. They didn't rely on the three-pointer as much as the Warriors obviously did for all those years. So for me, I think honestly, I hate to say this, but I think the Warriors would have crushed them just because of the range that all 5 players on the court for the Warriors could do. I mean, I don't think that the Bulls would have been ready to guard Steph Curry 35 feet from the basket. So I don't know. Maybe they would beat him up if they came into the lane. But just the range that Klay Thompson and Steph Curry had would just, I think it would just be too much. The Bulls were winning games, 80-75, and the Warriors are winning games 125-113. So I just don't think they'd be able to slow them down. Phil, what do you think?
All right, so I did a little bit of research here because I had a lot of trouble with this myself. And obviously, the cop-out argument would be like, well, if they played back in the 90s, when they wouldn't call the hard fouls, the Bulls would win. But if they played during this era of basketball, the Warriors would win. And I think that is sort of true. But I read that this was the first year of a 4-year stretch where the NBA had moved up the 3-point line. So what was going on? There was like a 10-year straight of a decline in points per possession or just points per game for teams in general. So what they decided to do, David Stern was like, I want to move the 3-point line up. And the 3-point percentage went from 33% as a league average to 37%, which is a pretty significant jump. So I think while you'd think that would make it a little easier for the Warriors, I think it actually helps the Bulls in a sense because they're getting 3 points for hitting mid-range shots, that in today's NBA would count as 2. And I think, just the toughness of the Bulls is really hard to argue with, but the depth of Golden State could pose some problems in an elongated series. I think if the series got to 7 games, that's when Golden State would thrive because they had a lot more depth than the Bulls did. The Bulls, I'm looking at the roster right now, and the Bulls only had 3 guys averaging over 10 points a game, with Steve Kerr being Luke Longley being the fourth best scorer at 9.1 points a game. Dennis Rodman was an absolute problem, by the way. He averaged 6 offensive rebounds a game. I thought that was just an incredible stat to look at. Like, he averaged 15 rebounds and 6 offensive boards a game. And I was looking it up. Nobody's averaged more than 5.4 in the last 10 years, and that's Andre Drummond 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was a different game. It was a different game. Now the percentage of shots that go up are so high, and the ball, nobody crashes offensive boards because they're scoring at such an alarming rate that there's just not that. I wonder what the statistic should be. How many shots? How many available rebounds were there while the Warriors were playing through their playoffs versus what the Bulls were facing? But also, I 100% agree with you, Phil, that the depth. I think about the Klay Thompson trying to D up, or even Kevin Durant. I feel like MJ would have tried to guard Durant, but they would have felt that either Rodman or Pippen would have been the better guy to guard Durant because of his length. I feel like Jordan would have tried.
Sorry to cut you off, Dan. Durant wasn't on this team. The 73.
No, we're talking about the earlier guys.
They added him the year after they won 73 games. Like, that's insane to me. And I think that team with Durant their first year, you give them a few more years together, that team would have gave the Bulls more of a run than this team would have in hindsight. And I mean, first off, I just want to shout out Festus Ezeli, one of the better names in NBA history. He was on this team. Shout out my boy Festus. Just want to say that. Whoever between Draymond Green and Rodman, whoever didn't get suspended for the rest of the series, that team probably would have. Because I think that's an ultimate battle between
that would have been an epic fight.
Madmen, absolute madmen, and I would just love to see them go at it for 7 minutes.
So looking at this, let's go through that roster, right? So Jordan is clearly going to try to shut down Steph, right? And so where does Pippen fall in on this? Let's figure out who's matching up with who in your mind of that starting five, because obviously it would have come down to depth and matchups of who was going to be able to score if something was being taken away.
I mean, honestly, dude, I think the Bulls defensively were so versatile between Rodman, Pippen, and Jordan. They could guard anybody, man. They would just be switching up, and it would be nuts. Like, that's why I think it would be they would give the Warriors such a hard time, because Rodman could guard 1 through 5. Scottie Pippen could guard probably 1 through 4, and Jordan could guard 1 through 4. I know Jordan was, a little bit older. They were 32 at this point. Rodman was 34. But Rodman, like I said, he averaged 15 rebounds a game. He was, he was only averaging 3 fouls a game. Like, that's absurd to think about, considering how involved he was on defense.
Yeah, it definitely was a fascinating matchup. I would love to see this play out hypothetical. Maybe we get that as a simulation when we're looking for sports content. But we do have 2 more episodes left of this series to go. So I'll give each of you the floor here. What are you guys looking forward to in the finale of The Last Dance?
Honestly, I didn't really look to see, aside from the, Pacers Bulls series, what was going to be in it, because I like to keep myself on edge and just surprised about what's going on. But I just really want to see how they tie everything together. That, because they keep bouncing back from 98 back up to 98, back and forth. I just want to see how they tie everything together to what, how everything came to fruition in 98, really.
Yeah.
First off, just in the beginning of episode 7, when Jerry Krause is getting interviewed by that guy, by one of the media members.
Craig Sager.
Craig Sager. And I didn't realize it was Craig Sager. But Jerry Krause first off looks like an evil villain from a really bad 80s, 90s cartoon. He's got those big bushy eyebrows and that like kind of sheepish look in his eyes. And Craig Sager makes that comment about the backstabbing going on. And then after he gets Jerry Krause angrily walks off to the stage right, one of the guys goes, "Way to go, Craig."
It was funny.
Oh, good.
But yeah, I mean, talk about a guy who doesn't look great coming out of this other than Pippen. It's obviously Krause. I mean, it's for a guy who did so much to put together an amazing team for many, many years. I mean, it was just handled so strange. I don't know what was more strange now in my mind. The way that the Bulls dynasty ended, or the way that the Patriots dynasty has now kind of ended here. With Brady leaving, right? Like, what made more sense? Either kind of no conversation, no rumors, no nothing, and then just a very blunt departure, or this very long, drawn out, he's going to be done, Phil's gone, we're starting a new era. Before, it's not like everybody was, everybody on the team was retiring. It was just a very bizarre way to end things, but Krause does not come out of this looking good, other than that one clip. where it was pretty awesome for him just to walk off like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that it was grossly mishandled by Jerry Krause. I think he had a Napoleon complex. He wanted all the credit. But, at the end of the day, man, you got the credit. He won what? Executive of the Year twice?
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty impressive, man. Like, take your kudos and give Michael and Phil their moment, because they're the ones that are putting in all the work, in the forefront for you. And you get to be the behind-the-scenes guy that, just gets to sit and on top of the castle and just overlook all this happening in front of everybody's eyes.
I wonder how much it would have changed had Krause just done the right thing, talked to ownership, give Pippen what he was due, kept the status quo, talked to Michael, maybe about, okay, what if you just went to spring training, but you came back and you took what if they just handled some of these things differently? Maybe they tried to work something out with Horace Grant, and I'm just interested if he I would love to hear if he regrets the way that these relationships that he had, because the success is there. If you look on paper, what Krause did, what Jordan did, Pippen, all of them, amazing. But the relationships behind the scenes were torn apart. And, I'd be just as curious one day to see the documentary about Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and what really went on behind the scenes there. But I don't think we're getting that one.
Yeah, I don't either. Dan, what are you looking forward to next week in the finale of Last Dance?
For me, it's like the first real team that I feel like, from an age standpoint, that I kind of was that first season of really watching basketball and understanding it, going out in the driveway, mimicking shots, really going through, and idolizing a particular shooter was Reggie Miller. So to see him creep into the last part of episode 8, and that's what we're going to get in episode 9. I'm really excited about that. I'm also curious if they're going to touch on Jordan's decision to then what happened with the Wizards, and whether if they're going to leave it alone with this was the last dance, we're telling the story up until this particular point, or whether they're going to follow Jordan and the legacy that he created. Is it going to turn into the Michael Jordan Odyssey, or is it just going to stay the last dance? So they've been jumping around in the timeline, so I wonder if they're going to now fast forward. That's what I'm kind of most looking forward to in the last 2 episodes.
Yeah, the thing that I'm looking forward to, there's 2 things that are both directly tied to the Jazz, because they're going to deal with both those series next week, the 97 and 98 finals. This is the flu game. I'm dying to get his full take on the flu game, because I don't think we ever heard that from him, and I also want to hear the psychology of the last shot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
All right, I think there we have. We've got over an hour on the Last Dance, so there's so much meat on the bone here. I feel we could go for another 2 hours if we wanted to, but we'll wrap it up here. Phil, I know you're not hanging around for the Survivor talk, so if you want to let everybody know how to follow you on social media and let them know some of the stuff you're up to, what do you want to promote?
Well, I haven't been. There hasn't been much content to be posted on social media lately, but my Instagram handle is Philtographs, PHILTOGRATHS. So if you ever want to see me gallivanting around and making a fool out of myself, you can check me out there. And I just cannot wait to get some semblance of organized sports on the television. I watched UFC 249 on Saturday, and that was fantastic. Some really quality fights. And seeing Tony Ferguson get pummeled to a bit by Gaethje was quite the spectacle. So just wanted to throw that in there because I thought that was just really awesome stuff.
It happened right here in my backyard, right down the street from me.
It did. It did. Yeah.
iStar Veterans Memorial Arena.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. So Phil, thanks for all the time hanging out this day. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And I can't wait till this is all over. Hope everybody's staying safe. And when this is all over, we will get to hang out and speak in person.
Yeah, indeed. And Dan's gonna stick around for a minute. We're gonna do the Survivor finale right after this.